I would like to point out 3 points. One, over the years, I think the investments we've made in human capital and infrastructure has been significantly successful, but it's about time we sort of leverage that success and move it to the next level so that the private sector can take its natural role of driving the economic growth in the next decades ahead of us. And second, even though Ethiopia's economic success has been described as a miracle by some, lately we have faced some headwinds. So there is a need to creatively change those challenges into opportunities. And finally, the kind of market economy we aspire to build requires a new set of policy and institutional framework. We need to upgrade. So I will introduce the required change in those regards. So that's why this homegrown economic reform agenda is absolutely critical at this point in time. In terms of building human capital and social services, we've made significant strides. Here what you see is some indicators, very selected indicators. In terms of, say, health outcomes, for instance, as you can see in this slide, we've managed to slash under 5 mortality by half. And also in terms of education, primary education coverage is now 100%, while secondary is about 80%. Tertiary, we can say a lot about it. From 2 institutions, we have about 50 public institutions and about 207 private higher education institutions, graduating 150,000 kids every year from public institutions alone. So phenomenal success in that regard, though quality issues would still remain. Here in front of you, you'll see the share of the contribution to GDP by different sectors, and you'll see that the green one is investment. As you can see, our growth has been really significantly fueled by investment. We don't have a disaggregation of public-private investment, but other data from fiscal data and financial data show that the lion's share of this investment actually came from the public side. And this significant public investment has kind of stimulated sectors like service and construction, and their share in the overall growth of GDP has been very significant. Those are really the key contributors of our growth over the last 15 years. And how did we make this? There was a purposeful effort by government in terms of domestic mobilization of resources. As you can see here, saving has increased by 15 percentage points over the last 15 years from 2005 to 2018. This is a phenomenal growth. It requires purposeful effort by the government, not only by expanding commercial banks, but also by using some creative ways of using, for instance, pension contributions have been channeled into public investment. And as you can see, credit by sector on your right side, the public investment and investment into private sectors has been increasing significantly over the years. And how did we manage to do this? Mainly by making focused policy intervention, which some describe as financial repression. But that domestic mobilization is not enough. There is also significant mobilization of grants and external resources in terms of debts as well. On average, our development partners are very much aware of this. About 8% of GDP on average has been mobilized from external resources. So I'd like to take a pause here and thank our development partners for your continued support of Ethiopia's economic growth. You've been part of our economic success, and I'm sure you will continue to play a very important role in the years to come. You will see here, total factor productivity has increased. I'm comparing 1997, 2004 to 2004, 2017. It has increased from 1.7 to 2.6. But as you can see, the significant contribution came from capital. So capital accumulation has been the key driver of economic growth. And when you take into account the inefficiency associated with this, because this capital accumulation has largely been by public institutions, so you would notice that productivity has not been overwhelming, and a lot of work is required in this regard as well. Here you have data from World Economic Forum and UNDP, and as you can see, businesses that operate in Ethiopia identify a number of structural and institutional constraints that made it very, very difficult for them to do business. I'm not going to go through each and every constraint here in the interest of time, but in summary, you'll see that things like forex shortage, access to and reliability of electricity, corruption and government inefficiency, poor internet services, poor access to finance are one of the key problematic factors that has sort of dampened the prospect of Ethiopia's economy while there is significant potential for growth. The aim of this reform agenda is to help overcome the aforementioned challenge that I have laid out in the previous slides through a comprehensive and well-synchronized set of measures. The reform has three key pillars: macroeconomic reforms, structural reforms, and sectoral reforms. But it's useful to see this as a bundle, as a package of reforms, or as it's like a three-legged stool for the reform to work. You need each element of the reform equally and collectively. I'm sure you'd say, but isn't that too ambitious to think of prosperity when you have this amount of poor population, when there are a lot of these challenges and so on? Yeah, you're right in a sense, but think of Ethiopia a year and a half ago. I'm sure any pundit would not have imagined the kind of results Ethiopia has achieved over the last year and a half. Any knowledgeable expert in African politics, Ethiopian politics, would have told you quite the contrary. But see how much we've moved in just a year and a half. And in the future as well, if we combine our resources, and if we rally the public behind, and if we get the right support from our development partners, nothing is impossible. Last year has been a big success in terms of showing the potential of domestic resource mobilization, but we've only barely scratched the surface. The potential is huge there, and this effort would continue. But finalizing ongoing public projects is very important. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said this is a year of completion, a year of finishing what we've started. So finishing those projects would be a key focus. But it's not about mobilizing resources, but how we spend it is also absolutely critical. So in addition to a very deep public financial management reform that the Ministry of Finance undertakes, enhancing the efficiency, transparency and governance of our state-owned enterprises is a very, very important area of reform. The second reform area, forex imbalances. I mean, here, in a nutshell, the imbalance is partly because of shortage and partly because of mismanagement, right? So the reform would focus on both. So the 3-year reform plan has identified the resource requirements and also the sources of these resources: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So in the short term, privatization and concessional borrowing and the work we do with our development partners here, I'll come back to this later, would be absolutely critical. But and also remittance, we'll have a remittance strategy, but remittance not merely the $100, $200 that people send to their families, but more of looking as a diaspora investment. For instance, creating a long-term saving instrument for the diaspora, so that some of them are now probably saving their money elsewhere, paying for it, or at 1%, 2% interest rate. But if we can offer competitive interest rate, this can be considered as a new source of forex resources. And then over time, exports, tourism, and FDI would pick up. But there will be a comprehensive reform on how we manage our forexes as well. So these two combined, I can tell you confidently that forex shortage is not going to be a defining feature of Ethiopia's economy when we implement this reform. Now, in terms of controlling inflation, the first important focus will be enhancing the capacity of NB, because NB needs to sharpen its policy instruments. So in that regard, major reforms would be done. But also, especially in recent years, we are learning that the significant contributor to inflation is our inefficient domestic trading. So improving the efficiency of the supply chain and domestic commodity markets would be a key area of focus. So through the reform period and beyond, maintaining a single-digit inflation would be a key target set by this reform agenda. In terms of safeguarding financial stability, in addition to modernizing the operation of our state-owned banks so that they can run at industry, at the level of industry standards, best industry standards. Again, upgrading NB's capacity would be a key area of focus so that NB will continue to ensure financial stability of the economy. And finally, as far as access to finance is concerned, in addition to developing primary markets like, for instance, competitive and well-functioning treasury bill markets, secondary bond markets, stock markets, this all would make sure that a well-developed capital and financial market would be a defining feature of Ethiopian economy. Also, there will be renewed focus on mobile banking so that financial inclusion is ensured. Ethiopia is no longer that hesitant regional trader. Vera, I'm sure a lot of ink has spilled in this compound, complaining about Ethiopia's sense of threat. The way we look at it now is Ethiopia can really be a key enabler for regional integration through trade. So we can create markets for Kenyans, for the Somalis, for Sudanese, for Djiboutians, and also we create markets for Ethiopians elsewhere, and taken together, the continental free trade and then the global trading regime would be a key opportunity that we need to explore. So much so that WTO accession would get serious focus. I see Ambassador Mesgano here, Ministry of Trade, and the chief negotiator would work very hard in ensuring this accession in a short period of time. Well, I will leave some of these issues, but logistic efficiency and domestic trade will also be key areas of focus. But generally, in the interest of time, let me just say this. Unless we deal with these structural issues, it's very difficult to exploit the full potential of the economy. But deal with this, and the opportunity is huge. Because you can sense there is a wasted potential in this country that we need to bring all together. If we remove the key constraints that I've laid out early on in the ICT industry and purposefully build a digital economy, the potential here is enormous. Said it could modernize our agricultural systems, the production and the sales end. It can create opportunities in the manufacturing because we can think of now connecting to global value chains. These 150,000 kids that come out of university can now think of exporting their skills when we create the right environment for startups, for innovation. And also, government services can significantly overhauled when we go digital. So the whole focus is taking Ethiopia digital through this reform period and build a very inclusive digital economy. So for that regard, for that purpose, I think, as I said, the telecom reform will be expedited and the ongoing work on the digital ID system will be completed. And then we create a sandbox regulatory approach so that there is enough room for innovators to think through their innovations. Now, what do you expect from this reform? For one thing, the rapid economic growth will be sustained because initially we will step up efforts to finalize our public investment projects. So in the short term, this means our investment to GDP ratio might increase, but really over time, we let the private sector take the lead once these reforms are fully complete, and then also as we undertake these reforms, the role of the private sector would grow, and we can build a very dynamic, active private sector that can play its natural role as an engine of the economy. Also, the source of growth will be rebalanced and diversified. We'll not be talking about just one sector, but I said about sectors, about opportunities, about exploiting the full potential of the economy. And as I said, even though the strong recovery in imports might widen our current account deficits in the near term, but as exports pick up and as we work through the macroeconomic reform, the financial stability will be ensured.